So we're going to go through number 36 through 40. All right. It says basic answers to questions 36 through 40 on the information below and on your knowledge of Earth and space science. And there may be some questions that require the use of the Earth and space science reference tables. Okay. So once again, our strategy, right, for the sake of time, I want to go right to the question. And I'm going to highlight some key words that I can go back to my reading, my graph, or my diagram. So it says a student makes a claim, right? And we've learned, right, if a student makes a claim, it is a statement. So what is the claim? That the amount of living forest acreage will decrease as the amount of ghost forest acreage increase in the coastal area near this residence. Which associated impact to an Earth system will most likely occur? So, in this question is saying, right, a student makes a claim that the living forest acreage will decrease as the amount of ghost forest acreage will increase in this coastal area, and what associated impact or effect to an Earth system will most likely occur, right? So I gotta find in my reading, I'm gonna scan what impact as ghost forest acreage increases, right? What effect does it have on the environment? So let me go and scan my reading, right? So I gotta know what a ghost forest is. So let me highlight that, okay? It is a term used to describe a group of dead trees or tree stumps that remain standing. Now, I'm going to be scanning my reading for any sort of impact that ghost forests have. So the second sentence, it does state that it impacts coastal forests. So maybe the third sentence will let me know. As sea level changes, the advancing seawater can advance and overtake the fresh water that many tree species in the coastal forest need to exist. So, as sea level changes, the seawater can advance, right, and overtake the fresh water that many tree species in coast forests need to exist. All right, so that's something to keep in mind. This salty water poisons living trees, leaving dead and dying timber. Most forests can be found in almost every coastal state in the United States. And the coastal forest serves as efficient carbon sinks, collecting and storing atmosphere's carbon. All right, they're critical for maintaining water quality as they naturally filter, cool, and slow the movement of groundwater and stream. So now this reading is talking about the benefit of a coastal forest, right? But as saltwater intrusions intensifies, the supply of coastal wood needed by the timber industry will also shrink, harming the economy of rural and areas that depend on it. So why did I go through that? Is because I'm looking at the impact that ghost forests have. So one of the things that I see is that it allows for sea water to advance. It allows for seawater to advance. And negatively affect tree species. This salty water poisons living trees. All right. So it has a pretty negative effect. So now, as I'm looking, I'm going to see, okay, let's see what it goes as a result. So choice one, the increase in wetland areas will decrease local humidity. The reading doesn't necessarily refer to that. And if we're having the increase in wetland area, right, that means that the area is more quote unquote wet, right, more moisture. Wouldn't it have an opposite effect? So I don't think one would necessarily be. It says the loss of Sorry. It says the loss of ground vegetation will cause an increase in water runoff and soil erosion. If you don't know what vegetation is, vegetation refers to plant life. So trees, plants, grass. So the loss of this ground plant life will cause an increase in water runoff and soil erosion, right? And it does say about how as sea level changes, the invading seawater can advance. So we have more water coming in as a result of a ghost forest. Okay? So this is a possible one. Let's keep going. As high tide water level increase, the local climate will cool due to more solar energy being reflected. Now, let me see if it says something. I don't see anything in terms of affecting climate, right? I don't see anything in terms of affecting climate. And local climate will cool due to more solar energy being reflected. Not necessarily. All right. And let's look at for new species that live on dead and decaying wood in ghost forests will increase the biodiversity of the ecosystem. New species that live on dead and decaying wood in ghost forest. Now, when I'm looking here, it says the salty water poisons living trees, and it even says right here, the invading seawater can advance and overtake the fresh water that many tree species in coastal forests need to exist. So this statement is actually saying the opposite, right, of being supported in the reading. So we do want to choose an option that is supported by the reading, and that's why I'm getting to choice two. So when I look at 39, it says the model below shows the effect of subsidence in the creation of ghost forests as a result of an earthquake that occurred on January 26, 1700, along the west coast of the United States. So it gives me the model, right, of the forest before subsidence, and then an earthquake occurs on January 26th, and then it fast forwards to present day, we have what's known as a ghost forest, right? So one of the first things that you do need to know is what is subsidence. Because even when I look at the question, use the model to compare the temporal scale of land subsidence. So what is subsidence? So if you don't already know, subsidence refers to the gradual caving in or sinking of an area of land, right? And there are some images that show that as a result. For example, a subsided earth is the caving in or sinking of land. Caving in or sinking of land. And sometimes this can be occurred due to mining, sometimes it can be occurred due to an earthquake as well. All right, so it says use the model to compare the temporal scale, right? This word temporal scale, what does it refer to? When I look at my common regions, terms that we need to know, right? My temporal scale is a time frame. So the word temporal, it relates to time. So my answer has to give some sort of time frame. All right, let's keep that in mind. It says use the model to compare the temporal scale of land subsidence associated with an earthquake. So we are comparing, right, due to the temporal scale or time range of land subsidence associated with the development of a ghost forest. So one, what happens to, we're looking at the temporal scale of land subsidence associated with an earthquake. and the temporal scale of the time frame of land subsidence with the development of a ghost forest. All right. So when I'm looking, the subsidence occurred as a result of an earthquake that occurred on January 26th, right? So the earthquake occurred on this day. And on this same day, the land, right? The land shows a land subsidence, right? There's a caving in that has taken place. It has occurred in within this single day, right? Within this single day. So therefore, when I'm looking at the time frame of the land subsidence or the land caving in or sinking in as a result of an earthquake, it has to be, right? But my answer is the time frame. It has to be within, right? Within or less than 1 day. All right. If you were to say that it, oh, sorry, less than 1 day. If you were to also say that it happens over seconds, minutes, or even hours, that would also be correct as well too, right? But remember, it happens on January 25th. So we may lean to the fact that like, oh, hey, I see before subsidence, the land is fine, January 25th, and it takes 1 day. But keep in mind, we want to know the time frame of the land sinking due to the earthquake. The earthquake does not occur at January 25th. It only occurs at January 26th and the land begins to sink. So that all happens within a day, right? So if you were to say less than 1 day, that would be accepted. Less than 1 day, that would be accepted. All right. Now it says the temporal scale of land subsidence associated with the development of a ghost forest. So the time frame, right? The time frame was substituting of land sinking in. How is it associated with the development of a ghost forest? All right. So now in this case, after subsidence has occurred, sorry. The earthquake occurred on January 26, 1700. Land subsides. Now we're looking at the time frame of land subsidence with the creation of a ghost forest. So it took from 1700 to present day, right? 1700 to present day. So when I'm comparing the time frame of land subsidence with an earthquake compared to the time frame of the land caving in associated with creating a ghost forest. Now this takes several hundred years, right? It takes several hundred years. So in your answer, um, if you were to say it happens over years, right? Or even decades, or even centuries, I would accept. All right. Some people would take 1700 and subtract it by the current year, right? And if you were to say, let's say 326 years, that would have been accepted to me as well, right? You could even say that this occurs over much longer periods of time than earthquake sinking. Right? Because if you're given an answer that compares the two events that's taken place, I would have accepted that too, right? But once again, it takes several hundred years, right, for the land subsidence to create a ghost forest. It takes within or less than a day for the land to subside during an earthquake. All right, that's the difference between the two. All right, so it says six proposed solutions for reducing the expansive ghost forest are below, right? Let me look at the question. It says, which three proposed solutions reduce the expansion of ghost forest, reduce the expansion of ghost forest, and would most likely be accomplished with minimal environmental impact and maximum aesthetic value to local residents. If you're not sure what aesthetic refers to, in our common regions terms, it refers to beauty or visual appear. So pretty much looking nice, right? Looking appealing. So when I'm looking at these solutions, right, I'm definitely looking for what could be accomplished with minimal environmental impact, which means that where we don't want to disrupt the environment. We want to disrupt the environment in the least possible way, right? So when I'm looking, one of the things that comes to my mind, right? I see limit development, right? We want minimal environmental impact. So we want to limit what we are developing, right, in the environment. Okay. Another thing that has minimal environmental impact, which means we want to do something that can have a positive or a better benefiting event or solution to the environment. So as I'm looking, as soon as I see preserve and restore the biodiversity, right? Anytime they're looking for something that is beneficial to the environment, anything that can restore or increase biodiversity is definitely going to be a plus. All right. Let's see what else. All right. Fortify seawalls with concrete, right? We're adding concrete to environment. I'm not sure. Using sand and soil, these are already natural things, right? We're using natural things to create dunes with grasses along the coast. This is definitely a potential answer because we're already using just some of the natural materials on Earth, right, in order to create a possible solution. The fortified seawalls with concrete, this is definitely not so much of using a natural material, right? Installing sand fencing to reduce loss of sand from wind erosion. Right here, I see installing sand fencing. Mm, that's definitely not so much using some of the natural earth materials, right, that we can use to propose a solution. So I'm not going to say that. And then it says install tall rock walls. So once again, the fact that I'm seeing installing and other artificial breakwaters, which are man-made, right? So if it's man-made, no, it's gonna have a larger effect on the environment. So that's why our best answer of using sand and soil, already natural material, in order to propose a solution. That's why I'm going to choose choice two, three, and five, which ends up being choice four. All right, and these are the answers. So definitely for these multiple choice, right, you definitely want to go using process of elimination, right? Just alone by me just seeing fortified seawalls with concrete and installing tall rock walls and artificial breakwaters. One and six already can be crossed out, which crosses out choices one, two, and three, right? Because we want minimal environment impact and maximum aesthetic value, right? So we don't want something that pops out, that doesn't look aesthetically pleasing. Right. So that's why choice four is the correct answer. All right. That's all for this video. All right. Have a wonderful, blessed day. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Take care.